Welcome back, preschool peeps.
Hi.
Today, we are going to talk about something that's been in our news pretty steadily over the past couple days, and Alison and I felt that it was important to address it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, and I'm going to read the official name off of information that I have right here, Pediatric Multisystem Inflammatory Syndrome. And what that might mean for us. In the past couple of days, there's been a lot of information in our news in the New York, New Jersey area about children who are struggling with this multisystem inflammatory syndrome, both in New Jersey and in New York. And I don't know how it is in other places around the country, but it's a hot topic here because what they are finding is that the children who have this syndrome, which the symptoms are persistent fever, rash, abdominal pain, and vomiting, that the children, a large portion of them, are testing positive for the antibodies for COVID-19, which means they were exposed to it. In New York City, they reported today that 81% of the children affected, and there are almost 40 children affected, if not more, because they're still investigating some of the children's illnesses. 81% of them had antibodies, which means they were exposed to COVID-19. A smaller portion, but still significant in New York City, 47% of them tested positive for COVID-19 itself. So they're either testing positive for the antibodies or COVID-19 or both, which means that this virus is impacting children and differently than adults, but still impacting them. And Alison and I thought it was important because we're about children and that's about children to be talking about the implications, I guess, sort of, as far as we can ascertain on this podcast. Alison and I were talking, my first instinct, Alison, I don't know about you, but the first time this news story came out, I looked at the television and I went, well, that's it. Distance learning is going to continue then.
Yeah, because my thought was like, how on earth are you going to open up school when this is now shown to affect children? So yeah, do the distance learning. Keep them safe.
You know, at the same time, I know that there are people who need something for their children, and we said this on a prior episode.
Yeah.
They either will have to return to work or they will be working from home and they need something for their children. And as Alison and I have discussed offline, more and more I'm beginning to think this whole event is like a hard restart on society. We really need to think about how business places function, about how all of our interactions function. This is much deeper than we're just going to close things for a while and reopen them. As we all know by now, a reopen is going to be gradual and a reopen has to be thought out pretty well. And many of us who are living in places that have not reopened yet are watching the places that are starting to reopen like, okay, you go first and let's see how that goes for you.
You guys do it. Yeah.
You guys do it.
Yeah,
and even when they start to reopen more here, I'm definitely more of the mindset of, okay, you all go and I'll wait a couple weeks and see how that went for you. I was talking with my son today, who's in his 20s, and honestly, he had the same attitude. He was like, yeah, they can all go back to the mall. I'm going to
I'm good here. I'm good here.
So I wonder how many people are going to think that way. And now that we know that there is some effect on the children, that they are developing this fever and rash and inflammatory syndrome, I think it puts yet another layer of horror.
Yeah.
Like as if it wasn't enough, another layer of horror and fear and terrible to this thing.
This whole thing has been already heartbreaking, but when I heard that the children were affected that way, it was like heart crushing. It was just like, this is already too much for me to handle on some days. But then hearing that, it just was like, it's heart-wrenching. Like it's just terrible.
I think there was some level of hope in that children aren't being affected. For me anyway, there was like this level, this sort of, I don't know, quiet level of hope that children were going to be okay.
Yeah.
And you know, the children, my understanding, and I'm going to give the disclaimer that I'm certainly no expert in this, and I've just watched some news stories, and I was watching Mayor de Blasio's news conference this morning in New York City about this. My understanding is that if children have the symptoms and they seek help early, that they can be treated. There have been some deaths. There have been, I certainly don't want to diminish those poor people who have lost children, and our hearts just go out to all of them. There have been fatalities. So I don't know. I honestly, I'm beside myself that this is now the next iteration of this. Yeah. That children are being impacted by their exposure, even if they don't sort of break out in COVID-19, they are developing antibodies from being exposed. And those antibodies are sort of turning in on them and attacking their own immune systems and causing this inflammation. I'm really hoping that, there's treatment for them and we don't see this sort of ongoing nightmare that we see with adults. And that by notifying people and parents to watch for the symptoms in a way that we maybe didn't know or take so seriously in the beginning of COVID-19, that'll help dispel some of it. I can tell you that in New York City, again, I'm looking at my notes and stuff here. In New York City, there's a plan to have immediate action to alert parents through, I guess, their emergency alert system there. Alert parents of more than 1 million children about these symptoms, so that they can be watching and have their children taken care of and treated. I think that because of the focus of this podcast, Alison, it's a discussion, and you and I certainly have no answers, but it's a discussion. Now, how is this knowledge about this inflammatory syndrome going to further impact the ability for us to bring children into schools? There was also a statistic this week about teachers. At least a third of teachers are in the high-risk group in COVID-19 who would have severe symptoms, who are taking a very big risk by being exposed. I don't know that we've talked about the teachers enough. We keep talking about bringing kids together, but folks, there are adults in those buildings taking risks.
As one of those people who is an adult in that building, I would much prefer not to go back right away. Like and I'm not really at risk. So I just don't think we can rush into this at all. Like, I feel like it's not just the children. There's a lot of adults that go in and out of those buildings. A lot of adults that work full time with, and I just don't think you can risk the exposure for the kids or the adults.
And yet I understand the need to open. There's no education like in-person education. I don't care what anybody says. Yeah. There's no education. We need to be in person with the children to be most effective, right?
Yeah.
And you have to weigh risk versus benefit sometimes. If children can potentially get sick from this, if teachers are at high risk, if, risk versus benefit. And I know that they're coming out with blueprints of ways to reduce population on any given day and trying to figure out all this sanitation. And I'm part of that with more than one system, right? Part of their talk about this as their consultant. And I understand that it may have to happen. And I still now, especially with this news coming out, I question, frankly, do we know enough about this virus to be making decisions about children? Do we know enough? Because we didn't know in the beginning. Remember, Alison, in the beginning, they were like, good news, the children don't seem to be impacted at all. Right. And then it became, well, the children might be carriers, but we don't know.
Yes.
And now it's this.
Well, I feel like there's been so much news like that of like, wear a mask, don't wear a mask. You don't need to wear a mask. It's not spread that way. Yeah. Now we do. So like there's things that and that's like not anyone's fault. They just didn't know enough back then. Now we're starting to learn. So there's like building blocks going on here. Like we didn't know this, now we do. Now we know this, now we know how. So I don't think we can make those decisions right now until we know more. Like making the decision to go back in the fall when we have 6 months until the fall, like, no, like.
I don't know when they'll make that decision. Luckily, in our states, the governors have said, and we've been, as people know from their news, in the New York, New Jersey area, we've been very much impacted by COVID-19. Yeah. And so our area, I think, would be like the last to go back to any semblance of a normal life. And our governors have not even committed to what they're going to do in the summer with children yet. And I wonder how this is going to impact that decision. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
We don't know.
They didn't know about this until
Right.
this week it's come out, and they canceled school. I mean, so I feel like, yeah, the more information, especially our governor seems to be like, all the information, all the science I can get, I'm going to use that to make those decisions. I don't think he's rushing for that decision. So I think,
no, I don't think so either.
So I think he definitely will take that, especially now that it's really there's been fatalities from it. I don't see him taking that very lightly. I think he's going to.
No,
really
I actually saw him talk about it. He was like choked up. He doesn't take it lightly. And I think, do you agree that this can impact the decisions they're making now having to do with kids, and that we may need to I don't know. It's unbelievable. This is unbelievable.
I feel like we should be distance learning until we 100% know that we can send those children into school and they will be safe. And that
How is that possible? How is that possible? People have to work.
Vaccines. I don't know.
Right here.
I also
people have to work. And they need childcare.
I know. I also think that the workplace environment needs to change. Like, clearly there are many people right now, the majority of people right now are working from home.
Yes.
In jobs that before they said, oh, that's not possible, you can't remote work. So it's possible for a lot of these workers to now maybe just remain as stay-at-home workers. You know what I mean? Like as home workers, instead of there'll be less of a need to go to the office at a 9-to-5 basis like they used to. So that might help out some people with the whole childcare.
And they can, if they could figure out a way, I think anyway, if they could figure out a way where most stores become curbside pickup like where we are, or become delivery, delivery or shipment. So the stores, the buildings they're in could actually be just sort of like warehouses.
Yeah,
and we order and they either ship it to you, right? They either ship it to you or they curbside, and people don't go in stores anymore.
Yeah.
That would actually help restart the economy in a way, because if we knew, okay, I don't know, if we knew this is how it's going to be, and now we need to hire people to run these warehouse stores.
Well, I know.
Although they're in danger, right? They're in danger.
Yeah, but they'd be actually maybe
that.
less in danger if people were going to the store. So now they still have their job, but their job has changed in that maybe they are going around the store and picking the items that people put on their shopping lists and putting them in the bags and the boxes, and then they send it to somebody else who delivers it from the truck.
So that means that
the cashier or the worker is not interacting with hundreds of customers a day. He's only interacting with the people that are in his store. I mean, I know people who have said they're treating the supermarkets like a warehouse. They actually put it in the pickup or their delivery, and they go online like they're shopping online, and they say, here's the things I want. I'll come pick it up at 2:00 on Wednesday.
Yeah, except there aren't enough time slots here.
I know.
To do that.
But I think if they change their business model, then they would have more workers to deliver.
So basically we're back to what I said before, I think, where we said we need to rethink the way society has functioned.
Works. Yes.
In order to reopen the economy, and so that people have something to do with their children when they have to work. I think we have to rethink all of that. Workplaces, maybe if schools were to say, well, we can manage this social distancing if we have groups of children who come every other day,
right?
And people's workplaces have to be understanding of that and be like, okay, you worked at home during the crux of the crisis. Every other day, we're going to allow you to work
from home. Yeah,
right?
Because that seems to be working for a lot of people.
It's like a societal reboot. Yeah, it's like a societal reboot.
It just changes the way society runs. Like there is no need necessarily to commute to an office every day. When you could work from home, especially if it's going to become one of those, like, we're sending children to school every other day.
Maybe. I just don't see how this inflammatory syndrome in children cannot play a part in these decisions. It has to play a part in these decisions now.
Yeah.
And I would, although they would never show it on television, I bet people who have been thinking about the reopening of schools and planning these blueprints are now like, oh my goodness, what now? Like, what do we do with that information?
And in a month, maybe, I mean, who knows? Like, it's something different.
Yeah.
You just, so you made your plan and now this happened. So then it's got to rework your plan, you know?
Maybe.
I don't know. I hope
that no more children are found with this. That is awful.
Oh my gosh, it's terrible. I just can't even
imagine. And it's awful even from the viewpoint of parents. My children are older, but I immediately, when I heard about this, turned to my husband and said, oh, I would be panicked if I had a young child. I would be like, oh my God.
That's how, like, my brother has a 1-year-old, so I worry about that. I mean, they've been very, very careful. My brother's still working though. You know, he's considered essential. So, but he's been very, very careful. So, like, but still, could I imagine my little niece going through that? No, like, it would be devastating. Like, I want to cry just thinking about it.
You know what's a devastating part of it, I think, and this is true for me with my adult children too. None of us wants to feel as if we were responsible for a loved one getting sick.
Yeah.
So we don't want to feel responsible for our children getting sick. If I know those of us who have adult kids, they don't want to feel responsible for us getting sick. So it has caused many layers of angst that we can't be the way we were functioning as a family.
Yeah.
Although we're learning to function different ways.
Right.
I think for this syndrome too, as someone who goes into schools or did go into schools very frequently, I don't want to be responsible for causing this inflammatory syndrome in children. I don't want it to be because I didn't know that I was carrying it because I was asymptomatic. And I'm pretty sure most teachers are going to feel that way.
I was reading an article about a teacher who is debating whether to go back to work because she does not want to be the blame for the children getting sick or the school closing down again. And she was worried about parents and other teachers and everyone in the district finding out whether that she was the not the epicenter, but the
carrier.
The carrier, and that she would get stigmatized for it. And she's like, there's so many levels of, like, I don't want the kids to get sick. I don't want the kids then to bring it to their parents or their grandparents. I don't want to be, the black sheep of the community because I got this and had to shut down the whole school and the whole system.
She's guilty for it.
Yeah, that she would feel an incredible guilt for the rest of her life if she found out that she brought it to her school community and, God forbid, somebody died from it.
This is really beyond the pale. I don't know, this sort of episode is like we feel obligated to talk about it and we have no answers. And when teachers ask me what's going to be, and I have no answers, no one has answers. But I do think that this syndrome is going to play into the current decisions that are being made regarding summer and the start of the school year. And it depends on how prevalent this syndrome becomes, how many children come down with it, how sick do they get. Again, this is new. We don't really know a lot of this. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out now. And my heart goes out to those families whose children are struggling and suffering, and to everybody who's struggled from this, really. I feel like every time they come out with something new, like this inflammatory syndrome, I feel like it's enough. It's enough.
God. It's already like such a huge weight. And then it's just like more piled on. Yeah. It's just,
this is enough already. All right. Well, now that we've solved nothing except to talk about something that's probably on people's minds and pose some questions, I think what we'll do is sign off and talk about something else.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us on these special COVID-19 influenced episodes of the podcast. We actually do a regular podcast outside of the crisis. Yeah. About having young children.
Remember those days? Yeah.
I do, vaguely. So if you are listening, please do subscribe, because even after this crisis is over, Alison and I do episodes about young children, about teaching and raising them.
Yeah.
So we do hope that you'll stay with us and tune in, subscribe, share. We thank very much all the people who are telling us the positive impact these special episodes are having on them. And we recognize, we recognize it's challenging for us at home during this to do these episodes and for you to get time. So thank you for taking the time to listen or watch us on YouTube. And we'll catch you on the next episode of How Preschool Teachers Do It, the COVID-19 episodes.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.